No one dared approach the grieving dragon Empress until a human janitor quietly sat beside her. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The grand imperial palace of Draconis hung suspended in the void of space, its crystalline spires glittering against the backdrop of distant stars. Within its cavernous halls, surrounded by courtiers who dared not meet her gaze, Empress Seraphina mourned alone. The news had spread throughout the 12 systems with the speed and force of a solar storm. Emperor Felzar was dead. The most powerful male dragon in the known universe had been assassinated during what should have been a routine diplomatic mission to the outer colonies. His body had been returned to the imperial palace wrapped in ceremonial gold, his scales already turning dull without the life force that had once made them shimmer like captured starlight. For 3 standard cycles, Empress Seraphina had not moved from her position in the Hall of Ancestors. She sat coiled upon the obsidian dais, her enormous serpentine body arranged in tight, defensive loops around the preserved form of her mate. Her scales, once of brilliant azure that inspired poetry and song throughout the empire, had faded to a listless gray. The temperature in the hall had dropped so severely that frost formed on the pillars, a physical manifestation of her grief that made even the hardiest of her subjects shiver uncontrollably in her presence. None dared approach. Not her generals, not her advisors, not even her own clutchmates. The imperial dragons of Draconis were not known for their restraint when experiencing extreme emotions. The last time a royal dragon had suffered such grief, 3 moons had been reduced to asteroid belts. The empire held its collective breath, waiting for Seraphina to either emerge from her mourning or destroy them all in her sorrow. On the 4th cycle, while the imperial court whispered anxiously among themselves from a safe distance, a human janitor named Tyler Grant entered the Hall of Ancestors. Tyler had been working in the imperial palace for just over 2 standard years. He was one of many humans employed in service positions throughout the Dragon Empire after Earth had peacefully joined the galactic community. Humans were still novelties to most species in the 12 systems, but they had quickly proven themselves to be adaptable, hardworking, and largely unobtrusive. They were perfect for positions that required diligence without drawing attention. The palace majordomo, a tall, feathered being named Krell, noticed Tyler entering the hall with his cleaning equipment and moved to intercept him. "Human," Krell hissed urgently, feathers puffing out in alarm. "You cannot enter. The Empress is in mourning." Tyler looked up at the majordomo. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a weathered face, his standard-issue maintenance uniform hanging loosely on his lean frame. "With all due respect, sir," Tyler said quietly, "the floors still need cleaning." "That's my job." Krell's yellow eyes blinked rapidly. "Are you not aware of the situation? The Empress has not consumed sustenance or communicated with anyone for 4 cycles. The Imperial guards themselves have retreated to the perimeter. It is not safe." Tyler glanced past Krell to where the enormous form of Empress Seraphina lay coiled in the distance, a mountain of dull gray scales surrounding the golden-wrapped body of the Emperor. "I understand," Tyler said with a small nod. "But I also understand that when my wife died back on Earth, the worst thing was how everyone started treating me differently. Sometimes normal is what you need most when everything else has fallen apart." Before Krell could protest further, Tyler wheeled his cleaning cart past him and began his routine at the far end of the hall, methodically moving from one section of the vast floor to the next, working his way gradually toward the imperial dais. The courtiers watched in horrified silence. Some sent urgent messages on their communication devices, while others hurried from the hall, unwilling to witness what they assumed would be the imminent destruction of an ignorant human. Several guards gripped their ceremonial weapons tighter but remained at their posts. No one wanted to create a disturbance that might draw the Empress's attention. Tyler worked steadily for hours, seemingly oblivious to the tension around him. The soft hum of his floor polishing machine was the only sound in the cavernous space. Occasionally, he would stop to adjust something on his cart or change cleaning solutions, his movements unhurried and methodical. Finally, Tyler approached the area nearest to the imperial dais. The frost was thicker here, crackling beneath his boots as he walked. His breath came out in visible puffs in the frigid air. Still, he continued his work, guiding his cleaning machine in careful patterns across the ornate floor. At one point, he looked up at the massive form of the Empress. Even in her grief-stricken state, she was magnificent. Nearly 60 meters of sinuous dragon form, with translucent wings folded tightly against her body. Her head, crowned with crystalline horns that could pierce battleship armor, rested protectively over the golden-wrapped form of her mate. Tyler finished cleaning the section of floor nearest to the dais, then turned off his machine. The sudden silence was jarring after the constant hum that had filled the hall for hours. He reached into his cart and pulled out a simple metal container and 2 cups. The remaining courtiers watched in astonishment as Tyler calmly sat down on the steps of the dais, just a few meters from the grieving Empress. He placed 1 cup beside him, within reach of the Empress if she chose to acknowledge it, and poured a steaming dark liquid into the other cup for himself. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Even the Imperial guards shifted nervously. The temperature in the hall dropped several more degrees, ice crystals forming in the air itself. For several long moments, nothing happened. Tyler simply sat there, sipping his drink quietly, looking out at the hall rather than directly at the Empress. He seemed to be giving her the courtesy of privacy while still offering his presence. "You are either very brave or very foolish, human," came a voice like ice grinding against stone. The Empress had spoken for the first time in 4 cycles. Tyler didn't jump or show any sign of alarm. He simply turned slightly to address her, though he still didn't look directly into her eyes, a sign of respect in dragon culture. "Neither, Your Majesty," Tyler replied softly. "Just doing my job and taking my break. I hope I'm not disturbing you." Another long silence followed. The courtiers remained frozen in place, hardly daring to breathe. "What is that aroma?" the Empress finally asked, her massive head lifting slightly. "Coffee, Your Majesty. From Earth. It helps me through difficult days." Tyler gestured to the second cup. "I brought an extra cup if you'd like to try it, though I'm not sure if it's to your taste." What happened next would be recorded in imperial histories and discussed in diplomatic academies for generations to come. Empress Seraphina, sovereign of the 12 systems, flame of the eternal stars, and most powerful draconic being in known space, carefully extended one enormous clawed appendage and delicately picked up the tiny cup Tyler had offered. The cup all but disappeared between her massive talons, but she brought it close to her snout and inhaled the aroma. After a moment's consideration, she somehow managed to take a small sip without destroying the fragile vessel. "It is bitter," she observed, "yet not unpleasant. I can add sweetener if you prefer," Tyler offered, reaching for his cart. "No," the Empress said. "The bitterness is fitting." They sat in silence for several minutes. Tyler sipping his coffee, the Empress holding the tiny cup that looked absurdly small in her massive claws. The ice in the hall stopped spreading, though the temperature remained cold. "How did you know?" the Empress asked eventually, her voice quieter now, less like grinding ice and more like distant thunder. Tyler set his empty cup down. "Know what, Your Majesty? That you could approach. That I would not destroy you for your presumption." Tyler considered this for a moment. "I didn't know for certain. But grief is grief, Your Majesty. It doesn't matter if you're human or dragon or anything else. It's universal." The Empress's enormous head tilted slightly, studying Tyler with eyes that shimmered like captured galaxies. "Explain," she commanded, though her tone lacked its usual imperial force. Tyler took a deep breath, absently running his thumb over the simple metal band he still wore on his left hand. "My wife died 3 years ago. Cancer. We'd been married for 22 years. His voice was steady but gentle. "After she passed, everyone walked on eggshells around me. No one knew what to say, so most people said nothing. They gave me space, which I thought I wanted. But all that space just filled up with more grief." The Empress remained silent, but her attention was focused entirely on the small human before her. "Then one day," Tyler continued, "my neighbor, just a regular guy who lived next door, not even a close friend, came over with his lawnmower and started cutting my grass without asking. When he finished, he sat down next to me on my porch, handed me a beer, and we watched the sunset together. He didn't say a word about my wife. Just talked about normal things, baseball scores, weather, complaining about his job. It was the first time in months I'd felt like a person again, not just a walking tragedy. Tyler finally looked directly at the Empress, a cultural faux pas under normal circumstances, but somehow appropriate in this moment. Sometimes the kindest thing isn't grand gestures or perfect words. Sometimes it's just sitting with someone in their pain and reminding them that the world's still turning. The Empress was silent for so long that Tyler began to wonder if he had finally overstepped. But then, a sound like distant wind through ancient mountains emerged from her massive form. "Your mate," the Empress said finally. What was her designation? Her name was Sarah, Tyler replied, a small, sad smile touching his lips. "Sarah Grant. Sarah Grant," the Empress repeated, the human name sounding strange yet somehow reverent in her draconic voice. She was fortunate in her choice of mate. Tyler's smile turned wistful. "I was the fortunate one, Your Majesty." Another period of silence passed between them, more comfortable than the last. "Falzar enjoyed what you call humor," the Empress said suddenly. Even in the most formal of imperial functions, he would whisper observations that would make it impossible for me to maintain proper decorum. 600 years we were mated, and still he could make me laugh like a newly hatched fledgling. Tyler nodded, saying nothing, simply allowing her to speak. "The court expects me to rage," she continued, "to burn worlds and destroy stars in my grief. It would be traditional, expected." Her massive head lowered slightly. "But I find I have no desire for destruction. It would not bring him back, and he would find such displays inefficient." "What do you want to do, Your Majesty?" Tyler asked gently. The Empress's enormous eyes blinked slowly. "I want to ensure his death was not meaningless. There are whispers of growing conflict in the outer systems. Falzar believed diplomacy could prevent a war. I must continue his work." She straightened slightly, her posture becoming more regal. "But I do not know how to begin. How to face the court, the imperial duties, without him by my side." "One moment at a time," Tyler said simply. "That's all any of us can do." The Empress considered this, then made a sound that might have been the draconic equivalent of a subdued chuckle. "Your species has a reputation for wisdom disproportionate to your lifespans," she observed. "Perhaps it is not entirely undeserved." Tyler shrugged. "We make a lot of mistakes to earn what little wisdom we have." The Empress carefully placed the tiny coffee cup back on the step beside Tyler. Then, in a movement that sent ripples of shock through the watching courtiers, she began to unfurl from her protective coil around the Emperor's body. "The imperial protocols for mourning stipulate 7 cycles of isolation," she said, her voice gaining strength. "But I believe, as sovereign, I have the authority to amend such protocols." Tyler stood, gathering his cups and preparing to return to his duties. "That sounds reasonable, Your Majesty." "Human," the Empress said as Tyler turned to leave. "You will attend me tomorrow at the same time." It wasn't a request. Tyler bowed respectfully. "Of course, Your Majesty. Would you prefer coffee or tea?" The Empress's scales shimmered briefly, a hint of blue returning to the dull gray. "Both. I wish to conduct a proper comparison." And so began one of the most unusual relationships in the history of the Dragon Empire. Each day, Tyler Grant would complete his maintenance duties in the Hall of Ancestors, then spend 1 hour sitting with Empress Seraphina. Sometimes they spoke of their respective mates, sharing memories both profound and mundane. Other times they sat in comfortable silence, drinking earth beverages that had quickly become the latest fashion among the imperial court once it was known the Empress favored them. Within 2 weeks, Seraphina had returned to her imperial duties. The blue of her scales gradually brightened, though observers noted a new pattern of silver that had not been present before, a physical manifestation of her mourning that would remain with her always. Tyler continued his work as a palace janitor, neither seeking nor accepting any change in status despite the obvious favor of the Empress. The only concession he made to his unusual position was accepting a small stipend to import better quality coffee and tea from Earth, as the Empress had developed quite discerning tastes. 3 months after their first encounter, Tyler arrived for their daily meeting to find the Empress reviewing holographic star charts with her military advisors. The images showed troop movements along the borders of the outer systems, and the expressions on the advisors' faces were grim. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," Tyler said, preparing to leave. "I didn't realize you were in a meeting." "Stay." the Empress commanded, dismissing her advisors with a flick of her tail. Your perspective may be valuable. Once they were alone, the Empress expanded one of the holographic displays, showing a small planetary system near the edge of Imperial territory. The situation in the outer systems has deteriorated, she explained. A faction calling themselves the Liberation Front has been attacking Imperial outposts. They claim to fight for independence, but their methods are those of terrorists, not revolutionaries. Tyler studied the holographic display, noting the positions of Imperial forces and rebel strongholds. What did the Emperor believe was the solution? The Empress's eyes clouded briefly at the mention of her mate. Thalzar believed there were legitimate grievances among the outer colonies that should be addressed. He was traveling to open negotiations when he was assassinated. Her voice remained steady, but the temperature in the room dropped noticeably. Many of my advisors now advocate for a decisive military response. They believe showing weakness now will only invite further rebellion. Tyler considered this carefully. And what do you believe, Your Majesty? I believe Thalzar was correct about the need for diplomacy, she said. But I also believe his killers must be brought to justice. I find these conflicting imperatives challenging to reconcile. Tyler walked slowly around the holographic display, studying it from different angles. You know, on Earth, we had a saying, speak softly and carry a big stick. It meant maintaining the capacity for force while prioritizing peaceful solutions. The Empress tilted her massive head. An interesting philosophy. But how would you apply it in this situation? You're the Empress of 12 systems, Tyler said simply. You already have the biggest stick. Everyone knows it. So maybe what's needed now is to speak very softly indeed, but to the right people. The Empress's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Elaborate. Instead of addressing the Liberation Front as a whole, what if you spoke directly to the people of the outer colonies? Not as an empress to her subjects, but as one grieving being to another? Let them see that their actions have caused real pain to a real person, not just struck a blow against an abstract empire. For several long moments, the Empress was silent, contemplating. Finally, she extinguished the holographic display with a gesture. Your suggestion has merit, she said. But such an approach would be unprecedented. No sovereign has ever addressed colonial subjects directly, without the mediation of local governors. Maybe that's exactly why it would work, Tyler suggested. Break protocol. Show them something they've never seen before. Their Empress as a person who can feel lost just as they do. The Empress's scales rippled with blue light as she considered the idea. It is unconventional. My advisors will object. Tyler smiled slightly. With all due respect, Your Majesty, you're a 60-meter dragon who can breathe plasma. I don't think you need to worry too much about objections. For the first time in their acquaintance, Empress Seraphina laughed, a sound like distant thunder that shook the very foundations of the hall. Several guards came running, weapons drawn, only to stop in confusion at the sight of their sovereign with her head thrown back in genuine amusement. You are a most unusual human, Tyler Grant, the Empress said when her laughter subsided. Very well. I shall address the outer colonies directly, but I wish you to assist in preparing my statement. Your perspective as a non-dragon may help me communicate more effectively with other species. And so Tyler Grant, Janitor from Earth, found himself in the unprecedented position of helping draft an imperial address. For 3 days, he and the Empress worked together, crafting a message that would convey both strength and compassion, determination and understanding. When the address was finally delivered, transmitted simultaneously to every world in the 12 systems, it caused a sensation throughout the empire. Instead of appearing on her throne surrounded by the symbols of imperial authority, Empress Seraphina chose to speak from the Hall of Ancestors, with the preserved form of Emperor Thalzar visible behind her. She spoke of loss and pain, of the future that had been stolen not just from her, but from all the peoples of the empire who would have benefited from Thalzar's wisdom and compassion. She acknowledged the legitimate concerns of the outer colonies regarding resource allocation and representation, promising reforms that her mate had been traveling to discuss when he was killed. Then, in a move that shocked imperial subjects everywhere, she transformed into her anthropomorphic form, a rarely used ability that allowed dragons to interact more easily with smaller species. standing just over 2 meters tall, still unmistakably draconic, but now roughly human-sized. She approached the camera directly. "I do not speak to you today merely as your Empress," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I speak as one who has known grief, as many of you have known it. I speak as one who understands that pain can drive us to actions we might otherwise never consider." She extended her hand, palm up, revealing a small hollow projector. When activated, it displayed a rotating image of a younger Emperor Thalzar in his majestic draconic form. "This was my mate," she said simply. "Not just the Emperor, not just a symbol of authority. He was a being who loved music and philosophy, who could spend hours debating the merits of different artistic styles, who took joy in the simple pleasure of flight through the rings of Castor Prime." Her voice grew softer, but no less intense. "He is gone now, taken by violence that solved nothing and has only brought more suffering. I ask you, all of you, whether you consider yourselves loyal subjects or freedom fighters, is this the legacy we wish to create? More pain, more loss, more grieving mates and clutch parents and offspring." She deactivated the hollow projector and looked directly into the camera. "I cannot bring Thalzar back, but I can honor what he stood for. He believed in a future where all beings in the 12 systems could live in dignity and peace. He was traveling to your worlds not to suppress or threaten, but to listen and understand." She straightened to her full height, her scales shimmering with renewed purpose. "I am establishing an Imperial Council with representatives from all colony worlds, effective immediately. Your voices will be heard, your concerns will be addressed, and those responsible for acts of terrorism will be brought to justice, not out of vengeance, but because lasting peace cannot be built upon violence without accountability." The address concluded with the Empress returning to her full draconic form, a visual reminder of the power that underlay her words of reconciliation. The response throughout the Empire was immediate and varied. In the central systems, many traditionalists were shocked by the Empress's unprecedented informality and policy changes. In the outer colonies, the reaction was more mixed: suspicion from hardliners, cautious optimism from moderates. 2 days after the address, as Tyler was finishing his maintenance duties in the eastern wing of the palace, he was approached by a group of Imperial guards. "The Empress requires your presence, human," the lead guard announced. "You will come with us immediately." Tyler was escorted not to the Hall of Ancestors where he usually met with the Empress, but to the Imperial Strategic Command Center, a facility deep within the palace that he had never entered before. There he found Empress Seraphina in her full draconic glory, surrounded by military officers and intelligence officials, all focused on a large holographic display dominating the center of the room. "Tyler." The Empress acknowledged him with a slight incline of her massive head. "Thank you for coming promptly." "Of course, Your Majesty," Tyler replied with a respectful bow. "How can I help?" The Empress gestured to the holographic display, which showed what appeared to be a remote outpost on a barren, rocky world. "We have received a communication from the Liberation Front. Following my address, a moderate faction within their organization has reached out with an offer." One of the intelligence officials, a tall insectoid being with compound eyes, stepped forward. They claimed to have identified those responsible for the assassination of Emperor Thalzar. They are willing to provide this information and assist in their apprehension, in exchange for amnesty for their own involvement in other activities. Tyler studied the holographic display, noting the heavily fortified nature of the outpost. "You're planning an operation to capture the assassins." "Correct," the Empress confirmed. "A joint operation between Imperial forces and Liberation Front moderates who wish to distance themselves from the extremists." Tyler looked up at the Empress, confusion evident on his face. "I'm honored by your trust, Your Majesty, but I'm not sure how I can be of assistance in a military operation. I'm just a janitor." The Empress's massive eyes focused intently on Tyler. "You are more than just anything, Tyler Grant. Your perspective has proven invaluable to me. Moreover, there is a complication." She nodded to another official, who adjusted the holographic display to show a close-up of the outpost's interior. There, Tyler could see holding cells containing what appeared to be prisoners. "The extremist faction is holding hostages," the Empress explained. including a group of human scientists who were conducting ecological research on the planet when they were captured. Tyler's expression grew serious. I see. And you think I might help understand how humans would react in this situation? Partially, the Empress acknowledged. But more importantly, I value your judgment. The operation as planned would almost certainly result in casualties, both among our forces and the hostages. My military advisors consider this acceptable. I find myself uncertain. This admission from the Empress, that she, the most powerful sovereign in 12 systems, was uncertain, caused visible shock among the assembled officials. Many exchanged nervous glances, while others stared resolutely at the floor, clearly uncomfortable with this display of imperial vulnerability. Tyler approached the holographic display, studying the layout of the outpost with careful attention. After several moments of consideration, he looked up at the Empress. Your Majesty, I'm not a military strategist, but I do know something about cleaning difficult spaces efficiently. He gestured to a service entrance visible on the holographic blueprint. Sometimes the best approach isn't through the front door. For the next several hours, Tyler worked alongside Imperial military planners, offering insights that no trained strategist would have considered. His years of navigating complex building systems as a maintenance worker provided a unique perspective on how to infiltrate the outpost with minimal confrontation. The plan that emerged was unorthodox but promising. A small team would enter through maintenance tunnels, bypassing most of the outpost's defenses, while a more visible force created a diversion. As the final details were being arranged, the Empress drew Tyler aside. You have done more than could be expected of any Imperial subject, she said, her voice pitched low enough that only he could hear. But I must ask one more service of you. Tyler looked up at her enormous form. Anything, Your Majesty. The team entering through the maintenance tunnels will need a guide familiar with such systems. Someone who thinks differently than our military personnel. Tyler's eyes widened as he realized what she was asking. You want me to go with them? I would not ask if there were any other option, the Empress said, a note of genuine regret in her voice. But time is critical, and you have a unique understanding that cannot be quickly taught to another. Tyler was silent for a long moment, absorbing the enormity of what was being proposed. He was a janitor, not a soldier or a spy. He had never been in combat, never faced any danger more serious than a malfunctioning cleaning drone. But there were human lives at stake. People who, like him, had come to this distant part of the galaxy seeking something new, only to find themselves caught in a conflict not of their making. I'll do it, he said finally. On one condition. The Empress tilted her massive head, clearly unaccustomed to having conditions placed on her requests. Speak. When this is over, when the hostages are safe and the assassins are captured, I want your word that you'll follow through on the reforms you promised. No matter what your advisors say, no matter how difficult it becomes. For a moment, the temperature in the room dropped sharply as the Empress considered this presumption from a human maintenance worker. Then, slowly, her scales began to shimmer with blue light. You have my word, she said, not as Empress, but as Seraphina. The reforms will proceed, regardless of the outcome of this operation. 24 hours later, Tyler found himself crouched in a narrow maintenance tunnel deep beneath the rebel outpost. He wore a lightweight tactical suit over his regular uniform, the best the Imperial quartermasters could manage on short notice, and carried a small holographic display showing the tunnel system layout. Behind him were 4 Imperial Special Forces operatives, each trained in covert operations and hostage rescue. The central detention area should be 50 meters ahead, Tyler whispered, consulting his display. According to the schematics, there's a service hatch that opens directly into the environmental control room adjacent to the cells. The lead operative, a reptilian being with mottled green skin, nodded silently. She had been skeptical of Tyler's involvement at first, but his knowledge of maintenance systems had already helped them bypass 3 security checkpoints without detection. The team moved forward cautiously, their progress slow but steady. Above them, they could hear the faint sounds of the diversionary attack beginning. Imperial forces making a noisy but controlled approach to the outpost's main entrance, drawing attention and resources away from the interior. When they reached the service hatch, Tyler examined it carefully. It's an older model, manual override only. No digital security to worry about, but it might be physically locked from the other side. The reptilian operative gestured him aside and produced a small device that she placed against the hatch. After a moment, she nodded. No obstructions detected. We can proceed. With practiced efficiency, the team opened the hatch and slipped one by one into the environmental control room. It was mercifully empty, filled with humming machinery that helped mask their entrance. Tyler consulted his display again. The detention area should be through that door. The hostages are likely in the cells on the east side, based on the thermal imaging. The reptilian operative placed a small scanner against the wall, confirming Tyler's assessment. 8 human heat signatures detected. 2 guards. She looked at Tyler. You will remain here. Secure this room and be prepared to assist with evacuation. Tyler nodded, relieved not to be part of the actual confrontation but determined to do his part. As the Special Forces team prepared to breach the detention area, he moved to the environmental controls, quickly familiarizing himself with the system. An idea struck him. Wait, he whispered urgently. I can help with the extraction. He gestured to the control panel. These systems regulate temperature, lighting, and atmospheric composition for the entire detention block. If I create a distraction here, it might make your job easier. The reptilian operative considered this for a moment, then nodded sharply. Proceed. On my signal. The team took their positions at the door. The operative held up 3 clawed digits, counting down silently. As she reached 0, Tyler activated a sequence of commands on the environmental control panel. Instantly, the lights in the detention area began to flicker erratically. The temperature plummeted, creating clouds of condensation that reduced visibility. Most importantly, the ventilation system began cycling rapidly, creating a disorienting whooshing sound that would make it difficult for the guards to hear the team's entrance. The Special Forces operatives moved with ruthless efficiency. Through the small window in the door, Tyler could see flashes of movement through the artificial fog he had created. There were no sounds of energy weapons or signs of prolonged struggle, just quick, decisive action. Less than 2 minutes later, the door opened and the reptilian operative reappeared. Extraction successful. Both guards neutralized, all hostages secured. We move now. The human scientists, looking bewildered but unharmed, were ushered into the environmental control room. They stared at Tyler in his mismatched tactical gear and maintenance uniform with obvious confusion. Hi, Tyler said, feeling oddly self-conscious. I'm the janitor. We should probably get moving. The return journey through the maintenance tunnels was tense but uneventful. The diversionary attack had successfully drawn most of the outpost's defenders away from their position, and they encountered no resistance. Within 20 minutes, they had reached their extraction point, where an Imperial shuttle waited with engines running. As the shuttle lifted off, carrying them safely away from the outpost, one of the rescued scientists approached Tyler. You said you're a janitor? She asked, disbelief evident in her voice. Tyler nodded, suddenly exhausted now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Maintenance technician for the Imperial Palace. I just happened to know my way around service tunnels. The scientist shook her head in amazement. Well, janitor or not, you just saved our lives. Thank you. Tyler managed a tired smile. All part of the service. Meanwhile, the main Imperial force, having served its purpose as a diversion, executed a strategic withdrawal from the outpost. They had suffered minimal casualties and, more importantly, had succeeded in capturing several high-ranking members of the extremist faction, including those implicated in Emperor Thalzar's assassination. When the shuttle returned to the Imperial Palace, Tyler was surprised to find Empress Serafina waiting in the docking bay, her enormous form dominating the massive space. As he descended the ramp with the rescued scientists, she inclined her great head in acknowledgement. Tyler Grant, she said, her voice carrying easily across the docking bay. Once again, you have provided exceptional service to the Empire. Tyler bowed respectfully. I just did what needed doing, Your Majesty. The Special Forces team did the real work. Your modesty is noted, but unnecessary, the Empress replied. The operation succeeded precisely because of your unique contribution. She turned her attention to the rescued scientists. You are welcome guests of the Imperial Court. You will be provided with accommodations and the opportunity to return to your research when you have recovered from your ordeal. As the scientists were escorted to the medical bay for evaluation, the Empress returned her attention to Tyler. "Walk with me." It was a somewhat absurd image, a 60-meter dragon and a human maintenance worker walking side by side through the grand corridors of the Imperial Palace. Courtiers and officials flattened themselves against walls as they passed, their expressions a mixture of awe and confusion. "The assassins have been captured," the Empress informed Tyler as they walked. "They are being transported to the Imperial capital for trial. Justice will be served." Tyler nodded, feeling a complex mixture of relief, satisfaction, and lingering adrenaline. "And the reforms you promised?" The Empress's scales shimmered with blue light. "The first meeting of the Imperial Council is scheduled for next week. Representatives from all colony worlds have been invited to attend, including moderate members of the former Liberation Front." They had reached the Hall of Ancestors, where Emperor Thalzar's preserved form still lay in state, though it was now surrounded by offerings and tributes from throughout the Empire rather than the protective coils of the grieving Empress. "I have been considering how best to recognize your service," the Empress said, coming to a stop before the Imperial dais. "Traditional honors seem inadequate." Tyler shook his head. "I don't need recognition, Your Majesty. I'm happy just doing my job." "Nevertheless," the Empress continued, "I believe there is a role you could fill that would be of great value to the Empire." She lowered her massive head to look Tyler directly in the eyes. "I would like to appoint you as Special Imperial Advisor for Human Relations." Tyler blinked in surprise. "I'm not sure I'm qualified for something like that, Your Majesty. I don't have any diplomatic training." "Conventional qualifications are clearly not what this position requires," the Empress replied, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Your understanding of grief brought you to my side when no one else dared approach. Your perspective as a maintenance worker provided insights my military strategists overlooked. Your human empathy helped shape an address that reached hearts and minds throughout the 12 systems." She straightened to her full, imposing height. "The Empire is changing, Tyler Grant. For centuries, we dragons have ruled through strength and tradition. But Thalzar saw that the future would require something more: understanding, flexibility, compassion. These are qualities your species exemplifies." Tyler considered this carefully. It was an extraordinary offer, to rise from janitor to Imperial advisor in a matter of months. Yet he found himself strangely reluctant. "Your Majesty," he said finally, "I'm honored by your trust. But I think I might be more valuable to you if I remain exactly what I am. A janitor sees things others don't notice, goes places others don't go, hears things not meant to be heard. If I became an official advisor, I'd lose that perspective." The Empress was silent for a long moment, her enormous eyes studying Tyler with new appreciation. "You continue to surprise me, human. Very well. You will remain in your current position, officially, but you will also serve as my personal advisor, reporting directly to me. Your insights will help shape Imperial policy, particularly regarding relations with non-draconic species." Tyler bowed deeply. "I am honored to serve, Your Majesty." And so began a new chapter in the history of the Dragon Empire. Over the following years, the reforms promised by Empress Serafina were indeed implemented. The Imperial Council gave voice to concerns from throughout the 12 systems, leading to a more equitable distribution of resources and opportunities. The extremists responsible for Emperor Thalzar's assassination were brought to justice, but with a focus on reconciliation rather than revenge. Throughout it all, Tyler Grant continued his daily maintenance duties in the Imperial Palace. To most observers, he was simply an unremarkable human janitor going about his work with quiet efficiency. Few knew that he also spent an hour each day with the Empress, discussing everything from imperial policy to human culture to the comparative merits of different Earth beverages. 5 years after their first meeting, Tyler was cleaning the grand windows of the Imperial audience chamber when a commotion at the entrance caught his attention. A delegation of dragons had arrived, smaller than the Empress but still imposing, with scales in various shades of green and gold. They moved with the careful precision of those carrying precious cargo. Tyler recognized them immediately as members of the Imperial Hatchery, the caretakers responsible for the next generation of dragons. Their presence in the audience chamber was highly unusual. Empress Serafina entered from her private chambers, her scales now restored to their full azure brilliance, though the silver patterns of mourning remained. She acknowledged the delegation with a regal nod. "We bring joyous news, Your Majesty," the lead hatchery attendant announced, her voice trembling with excitement. The final clutch laid by Emperor Thalzar before his passing. It has begun to hatch. A ripple of blue energy cascaded along the Empress's scales. "Show me," she commanded. The attendants carefully opened an ornate container they had carried into the chamber. Inside, nestled in shimmering crystalline sand, was a large egg. Its surface was translucent, revealing the shadowy form of a dragon hatchling within. Even as they watched, a small crack appeared along the egg's surface. The Empress lowered her massive head to observe the hatching process, her eyes glowing with an emotion Tyler had never seen in her before: hope. As the attendants and court officials gathered around the hatching egg, Tyler quietly returned to his cleaning duties, giving the Empress her privacy for this momentous occasion. He had nearly finished the windows when he heard his name. "Tyler Grant," the Empress called, her voice carrying easily across the vast chamber. "Approach." Tyler set aside his cleaning equipment and approached the imperial dais, bowing respectfully. To his surprise, the Empress had shifted to her anthropomorphic form. The more humanoid appearance she rarely adopted except for the most significant diplomatic functions. In her arms, she held a tiny dragon hatchling, no larger than a human infant. Its scales were a deep indigo, with small patches of silver already visible along its spine. "This is the final offspring of Emperor Thalzar," the Empress announced, her voice filled with pride and lingering sorrow. "The last heir of his bloodline. She will be named the Lara, in honor of her sire." The gathered court officials murmured their approval of the name. The tradition of naming royal offspring after deceased mates was ancient and revered in dragon culture. "The hatchling requires a kithsha," the Empress continued, using a draconic term that roughly translated as guardian teacher in human language. The announcement caused visible shock among the court officials. The position of kithsha to a royal hatchling was one of the highest honors in dragon society, traditionally reserved for elder dragons of noble lineage who would guide the young royal in the ways of imperial tradition. "I have considered this matter carefully," the Empress said, her gaze sweeping across the assembled officials before coming to rest on Tyler. "And I have chosen." It took Tyler a moment to realize the implications of her focused attention. When understanding dawned, he felt his heart skip a beat. "Your Majesty," he began hesitantly, "I'm deeply honored, but I'm not a dragon. I know nothing of raising a draconic hatchling." "Precisely," the Empress replied. "The Lara will have many teachers in the ways of dragon tradition, but she will be Empress of more than just dragons. She must understand all the peoples of the 12 systems, their needs, their perspectives, their ways of thinking. Who better to begin her education than one who has already taught her mother so much?" Tyler looked at the tiny hatchling in the Empress's arms. The infant dragon was watching him with eyes that already held the spark of intelligence characteristic of her species. As he hesitated, she extended a tiny clawed appendage toward him, chirping softly. "She appears to have made her own choice," the Empress observed, a note of amusement in her voice. Tyler took a deep breath, then bowed deeply. "I would be honored to serve as kithsha to Princess Thalara, Your Majesty. I will do everything in my power to help her grow into a ruler worthy of both her parents." The Empress extended her arms, offering the hatchling to Tyler. With careful movements, he accepted the tiny dragon, cradling her against his chest as he had once held his own daughter long ago on Earth. Princess Thalara chirped contentedly and settled into his arms, her small form radiating warmth. "It seems some wisdom transcends species," the Empress commented, observing Tyler's natural ease with the hatchling. Tyler smiled down at his new charge. "My wife always said I had a way with children. I never thought I'd be testing that theory on a baby dragon." The Empress returned to her full draconic form, towering over Tyler and the hatchling. "There will be practical matters to arrange. Your duties will be adjusted to allow time for your new responsibilities. Quarters will be prepared adjacent to the royal nursery." "Thank you, Your Majesty," Tyler said, still somewhat overwhelmed by this unexpected turn of events. As the court officials dispersed to begin implementing the Empress's directives, Tyler remained on the dais with the Empress and the hatchling. After a moment, he looked up at the enormous dragon who had become, against all probability, his friend. "You know," he said conversationally, "when I applied for a maintenance position in the Imperial Palace, I was just hoping for steady work and the chance to see a bit more of the universe. I never expected all this." The Empress's scales shimmered with blue light, her equivalent of a smile. "Life rarely conforms to our expectations, Tyler Grant. Sometimes it offers so much more." Tyler looked down at the sleeping hatchling in his arms, then up at the Empress who had found her way through grief to a new beginning. "Yes," he agreed softly. "Sometimes it does." In the years that followed, visitors to the Imperial Palace would often witness an unusual sight: a human man walking alongside a young dragon princess, teaching her about maintenance systems and Earth history, sharing stories of his homeworld and his late wife, instructing her in the simple wisdom that had once brought comfort to a grieving Empress. And if those visitors arrived at just the right time, they might also observe an even more remarkable scene: the Empress of the 12 systems, the most powerful draconic being in known space, taking a brief respite from her imperial duties to join her daughter and the human Kithsha for a cup of coffee and conversation. For in the vastness of the Dragon Empire, where countless species lived under the protection of beings who could shatter planets with their rage, perhaps the most revolutionary idea of all was simply this: that comfort could be found in quiet companionship, that wisdom could come from the most unexpected sources, and that sometimes what a grieving heart needs most is not grand gestures or perfect words, but simply someone willing to sit beside them and remind them that they are not alone. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.